But what I really feel now is that I want to have that deep connection to nature because I'm getting back to my roots. I think I am rediscovering my ancestral roots where all of our ancestors lived in harmony with nature. We did not plunder and pillage nature. We took from her what we needed for our well-being and for our survival, in terms of building shelters from wood and hunting and foraging for our food, and making clothing out of the hides of animals. So that's been rekindled in me, and I have like a deep reverence and respect and love for nature.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master San Qing, and we have a meeting of the minds today. Two worlds crossing over, high intellect to creation to conscious explorer. I'd like to welcome to the podcast Dr. Naeem. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. As I'm happy to be here.
And I'm really excited to have this conversation today, is sort of like get a deeper understanding of conceptual to realized to all things in between, because I believe you've been exploring and acquiring a deeper understanding of the internal alchemy that I teach people and have for over 30 years, on including your own exploration of things that are more science-based in their nature and offering. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today. How about we start with a little bit of an origin story of your own?
Sure.
How you got here today?
Oh, that's okay. That's a long story, which I'll try to summarize here. Again, I'd like to thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, I was born in London in the UK, and my parents were they were immigrants they were born in India, but with the partition, they immigrated to Pakistan, and then they moved from Pakistan to London in the UK for economic opportunities. I was born there, but I only spent 5 years there because my my uncles were all here in Toronto, Canada, where I reside now. So she wanted to be closer to family. So they decided to immigrate to Canada, which we did in the mid-70s. And at that time, we lived with one of her uncles, and then we moved out into our own apartment. And then we moved out east of Toronto, about 30 miles east, to a city called Oshawa. Now, back then, it's changed dramatically since then. I'm of South Asian origin, and we were one of the few South Asian families in that neighborhood. I was the only South Asian kid in my elementary school, and going on to middle school and high school, I was only one of two. So I faced a lot of racial discrimination, a lot of racism, a lot of bullying. And, I was just a kid, and I really did not understand why I was being judged for the way I looked, my ethnicity, my beliefs, because I never grew up I never judged anybody for those things, right? I judged everyone on face value, their character, how they interact with me. So I didn't understand why this was happening. So I faced a lot of bullying, and I was essentially ostracized. And because of that, I had to find a way to deal with this. And I did that through excelling academically, right? So I basically dived into my studies, and I was at the top of the class, all throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. But I also, because I did not understand why I was being treated the way I was, I developed an interest in human behavior and why people do the things they do and act the way they do. So I dived into human psychology, and I started reading various books, and that brought me to um, a study of consciousness. And psychology led me to consciousness. So I was, at that time, we're talking about, the 80s when I was in high school. And I dived into people like, I'm sure you're familiar with Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer. I dived into those authors, and they had a lot of books at that time. And obviously, we didn't have internet at that time. There's no YouTube. So it was just books, essentially. And there's no other social media. And it just basically opened up a whole new world for me of understanding who we are as individuals and as human beings, because this is not something like the stuff I was reading. I wasn't taught by my parents. I mean, I grew up we're of Islamic faith, and I grew up with that religious tradition, but it was more ritualistic. The way I was brought up, it wasn't getting to kind of the deep, the spiritual aspects of the faith and the belief system. So it was real more ritualistic and more about the traditions and the holidays. So I didn't get this kind of knowledge of consciousness and true human nature from my parents, from the religious figures who I was around, from the education system, from my peers, from anybody. So it was basically that self-education of consciousness and what it means to be a human being, and that led me from human behavior to consciousness to metaphysics. I got interested in human potential and how we can achieve, the highest potential and become the best versions of ourselves. But there were a lot of blocks that I had built up over time because I was essentially, with all the discrimination and the bullying I had faced, I grew up with this belief that I'm not good enough. It was a limiting belief, and that has actually stayed with me, not just in my childhood and my adolescence, but all throughout, my higher education into my adulthood. Even to the point where it affected my relationships, my relationships with friends, with my wife, with my kids. And it's only recently that I've started to really do that deep shadow work, to really dive deep into, those subconscious blocks, those suppressed emotions that I have held. But going back, let's go back. So, I always felt that I needed to be better than everybody else, which is why I excelled in academics, because I was being treated as less than I was by people around me because of my beliefs and, discrimination. I had to prove myself. I wanted to be better than all of them. And it was all this, external seeking, like just, thriving in academics, and I became interested in science. I became very fascinated with science, not just the consciousness I talked about. I was just really fascinated with all aspects of that, which is what got me interested in pursuing a career in medicine, which is why I entered medical school. And then, I went on to do my training. I did it in Cleveland, Ohio, at a Case Western Reserve University. I did my internal medicine, my pulmonary and critical care. Then there was a whole other layer that opened up, because when I got into medical practice, what I noticed was people were not healing. They were not getting better. I was treating people with chronic diseases, and I was not seeing them improve. And I dived deeper into why. And it was because what I realized is that the medical profession and the healthcare system treats the patient as one-dimensional, just as a physical being, completely ignoring the deeper aspects of who we are, the psychological, the emotional, the vibrational, the spiritual, or the consciousness, right? So I had already I had already been exploring all these topics earlier in my life before I got into higher education and medical school. But then I got sidetracked because, as you can imagine, medical school is really, really busy. Your training is really busy, and you're basically kind of, you're overwhelmed with that. And you can't really devote any attention to anything else. But when I got into practice, it was around that time that I got married. And then after a few years in practice, I started to really look at this. So why are people not healing? And I discovered that we are just treating them as just physical beings. They just need medications and procedures and surgeries. But I discovered a whole deeper aspect to healing. And I dived into that. I dived into consciousness even more, metaphysics, psychology of healing, ancient healing techniques, and traditions. And that's what led me to write and publish my first book, Healing from the Inside Out, Overcome Chronic Disease and Radically Change Your Life, which has been out for about 7 years now. So I've actually said quite a bit. So I'm just going to stop here and see where you want to take our conversation, because I've given you a lot, a lot. And, you probably
excuse me.
about all
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
I mean, it just is a testimonial to the realization that when you really go looking, you will find it.
Right.
And it doesn't come in the limiting starting point of neurology, biology, psychology, physiology.
No.
These are very limited in of themselves. And so when you start there, it's a good starting point. But most people that take the journey that you have will end with, and this is where most of my students are medical doctors, Chinese medicine doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, acupuncturists, light workers, healers, because they need to get a grasp on something that's actually repeatable method that works, that actually bears fruit to their experience, not something that is just words peppered into a cure of something that there should never have been an ailment that even started from that very seed, which I really believe is where you've discovered this inner working, going down the route of becoming a medical doctor and realizing that this is doing nothing. A placebo works better than this, and placebo is very powerful.
For sure.
Placebo is really the seed of all things. And so when you go back to your roots and your ancient roots in nature from your own family heritage, and realize that it's steeped in this incredible layer of mysticism that is quite frankly dismissed at this point, yet 600 years ago.
Right.
This is a testimonial from basically a friend of the channel, Michael Cremo, who spent his whole life discovering and searching for the origins of humanity, or the human race. And through his own amazement, having done this for 80 years, he's realized that there is actual recorded document-based, evidence-based information that correlates things back to 1 million years. The form that we are in right now has been realized for 1 million years on paper. If you look deep enough, you will find it. And so, the excitement that I get, the charge you're getting right now, that you're feeling through your body, that I see you feeling, this is the nature of what we speak of, the power of what we speak of. And I feel it's beautiful to see that, because I was subject to bullying as a child. I experienced it, and I think that evoked many things in trajectory of where I am today. But you understand that, being a little different per se, my difference was I was just far too advanced on an intellectual side, where I absorbed information. I just sat in the corner of the room, basically making sure people didn't physically violate me. And my answer to that was to verbally eviscerate them, and they couldn't handle that. So the response to that is, "You're so weird, I need to beat you." And then when I would stand up after a beating of 6 or 8 kids kicking the living life out of me and say, "Is that all you've got? Come on now."
Wow.
That would just be amazed that, that, hang on a second, I haven't broke this guy's will. What's going on here?
Right.
This roots, and the roots that you have, and the deep nature of that. And the ancestry that we need to really be aware of and value
Yes.
where that comes from. And I think people have lost sight of that due to destroying religious spirituality, and then this embodying this atheist sort of belief system, which in actuality, any atheist you speak to has a belief system, and they just don't realize that. You just bring it to their attention and go, oh,
Yes.
I didn't know I was thinking like that. Of course you don't.
Right.
But just all the stuff that you're sharing, my friend, is just so powerful, and it resonates with me because I feel like I've been on a similar journey.
Yeah.
And so it brings you to that point where you realize that it's not enough coming from the limitations of modern science,
Right.
let's say. And so now you've dug deeper into your ancient ancestry and roots within this sort of healing mysticism. And what was your discovery? I would love to hear that.
Well, I mean, what I discovered is that if you look at, let's talk specifically about healing. I mean, there's thousands of years of healing traditions that have gone back that far in all cultures of the world. I mean, you can look at, indigenous cultures here in North America. You can look at ancient Chinese medicine. You can look at, ancient India. And what is and other parts of the world too. I mean, you can look at Europe. I mean, there's the Druids and there's other traditions as well. I'm not familiar with all these traditions, but what is very common to all these different traditions is that they saw the human being as multifaceted. Okay, so multifaceted meaning we're not just physical beings. We have a mental aspect, our psychology, we have our emotions. But if you go deeper than that, we are vibrational beings. So what do I mean when I say that? What I mean is that if you break down all of matter into its fundamental, fundamental unit. I mean, you look at, let's just look at life forms. We break them down into cells. What are cells made of? They're made of organelles. You break down those organelles into molecules. Molecules are made of atoms. Atoms are made of electrons, protons, and neutrons. And then even that's not accurate because, you break it down further and there's subatomic particles. And then there's the quarks was a term that was used once. And then, there's string theory. And basically, all it is, if you look at the fundamental, look at matter in its most infinitesimal form, it's mainly empty space, right? It's empty space. They say 99.129% of all matter is just empty space. So what does that mean? That means that it's just a vibrational frequency. It's just energy, right? And if you look at the origin of the universe, we are taught by science that there was a big bang. And that big bang was a cataclysmic event. Started with a tiny point and a rapid expansion of energy, which led to the creation of matter, which we see in the form of stars and planets and galaxies and whatnot. But if you look at the universe itself, it's empty space. All it is there's nothing out there. I mean, the stars and the planets and galaxies, they make up just a small percentage of what's out there. And what that tells me is that the universe is essentially emptiness. Now, what is emptiness, right? Is it really emptiness? Well, there's something there because everything here arose out of something. So what do I like to call that something? I mean, I like to call it consciousness. It is my word for it. Now, some people may refer to that as higher power, God, whatever term you want to use. It doesn't matter. It's just that everything arose from this emptiness, but that emptiness is consciousness, just like how we appear as physical form. We are just a vibrational frequency. So what I learned about all these different, ancient traditions is that they had that realization. They had that realization of our true nature. And it was when it came to, let's say, illness or disease, it was seen more like an imbalance um, in our being somehow, whatever, whether it's an energy imbalance or imbalance somewhere, or an imbalance in our thought process or in our emotions. Um, I'll give you an example. I mean, let's look at emotions. Let's just talk about emotions. There's not anybody. I mean, you've shared your experiences, and I've shared some of mine. There's nobody, very few people on this planet that are not subject to trauma. Okay, trauma of one kind or another. And usually this happens earlier in our life, like when we're a child, we're an adolescent, although, we can have a trauma as adults as well. But how do we handle that trauma? So I'm not talking about the physical aspect of trauma. Like, say, you are in an abusive relationship, right? I mean, some people will stay in that situation for a long time before they figure out that they need to get out of it, or they'll end up staying in it and suffering. But let's just say that you're able to remove yourself from that situation. I'm talking about big T trauma. There's also little T trauma. Let's talk about big T trauma. It's not just removing yourself from the situation, but it's about all those emotions that we feel during what we are going through. Because Gabor Mate, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's a Canadian physician who's become a writer and a speaker, and he talks about addiction, stress, and trauma. He says it very beautifully when he says, trauma is not what happened to you. It is what is happening inside you as a result of what you've been through. So what he's talking about is when we feel all those negative emotions around whatever traumatic experiences we've been through, most people tend to suppress them. And they suppress them because they don't want to feel the pain of those emotions, even when they're out of the situation that's causing the trauma. But what we don't realize, or what people don't realize, is that when you suppress those emotions, they are going to get stuck in your physiology, and they will manifest in some way if they're not expressed. They could manifest as physical symptoms like chronic pain, could be headaches, could be abdominal pain, it could be breathing trouble, could be cough, could be any of those things. It depends on what the emotion is. And when you suppress those emotions, they're going to come out in one way or another. So the point I'm trying to make is that emotions are not meant to be suppressed. They are meant to be expressed and felt right to their core. Okay? This is how we're meant to live. We are meant to feel all those emotions, the negative ones and the positive ones. Because let me describe this as with a metaphor. The way I describe negative emotion is like a hurricane. So when you have a hurricane, it's like a fierce storm, and it is just chaos. You're being buffeted and you're being thrown around, and things are flying all around you, in a hurricane. And it's like an onslaught, right? And it's just like a negative emotion. But what's at the core of that hurricane, right? What's at the eye of the hurricane? It's just a place of peace and calm and serenity. Every hurricane has a place called the eye of the hurricane where there's nothing happening. It's just all around. Same thing with a negative emotion. At the negative, when you're feeling that negative emotion, it can feel like a storm, right? You're going through like a metaphorical storm. But if you're able to burn through it and get to its core, you will find a place of deep inner peace. Okay. But that can only be experienced once you get through that, when you allow yourself to feel that emotion. And the same thing with positive emotions, right? Some people, they often feel that like something good happens in their life. For example, I don't know, they win an award, or they're an athlete, they win a competition. And some people feel like they don't deserve that, right? So they tend to suppress the joy, the ecstasy, all those positive feelings that come out of that. It doesn't have to be that. It could be like, you achieve something at work that your boss is proud of. You meet someone new who you're interested in. It could be any of those things. People tend to suppress those things because they feel like, because of that limiting belief that I suffered with for a long time, that I'm not good enough. Like, even if something good happens, well, I'm not good enough. Like, well, I don't deserve this, right? And I suffered now. The only reason I know this because I suffered with that for a long time, until I finally allowed myself to just feel everything that comes my way, good or bad. It doesn't matter. And in fact, like, I was talking about how I've been doing this work for many years, but like a few years ago, I faced multiple crises converging on me at once. There was like a home emergency. There was a family emergency. We were in the midst of COVID, so there was a lot of professional challenges and relationship issues as well. And everything just came at me at once. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Dark Night of the Soul. You're familiar with the
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I had one. My
Yeah.
teachers are very clear. In any incarnation, there's a cycle of 9 that you could be subjected
Yes.
to if that's part of your experience. I had one, and that was enough for me to realize my eternal immortal self, and basically acknowledge like the last 1,000 lives that I've lived.
Amazing.
But moreover, it was every thought, every feeling, every emotion at once for 5 or 6 days.
Wow. Mine actually lasted a little longer than that. I went through a dark night of the soul this was like around 2021. And the process continued. And it's like I went through a metamorphosis. Like, how the caterpillar builds a cocoon, and in the cocoon, it just kind of it just disintegrates into this goop, for lack of a better word. And the imaginal cells are what it becomes. And those imaginal cells give rise to the butterflies. So I went through that process. Like I went through a dark night of the soul. I was in the cocoon and I was trying to emerge. And I did emerge to some degree, but the process did not finish until last summer because I faced more challenges after that. And I had to deal with those. So it actually, I got through it. And now I never want to say that I am fully awake, but I am more awake than I have ever been because there's always more to learn. There's always more experiences that are going to come our way, however we want to frame them or describe them. And the process of conscious evolution is a never-ending process. There is no depth to how far into your own being you can go. The way I describe it is that our inner world is as complex and as vast as the universe itself, which is a miracle, right? And a lot of people don't understand it when I tell them that. Like, how can our inner world be as complex as the universe itself? Well, you have to do that deep inner work. I mean, you have to face adversity. You have to face challenges. You have to be forced to go within, which I was more so in the last few years. And there's something I want to say about meditation, just to this point. Meditation is huge now, and it's like it's almost like a cliche, but a lot of people tell me that they can't meditate. So I finally understood why. And it took me a little while to figure this out. It's because the thing is, when you're meditating, right, you're withdrawing from the external world and you're going deep within. Well, the reason people can't go deep within is because they face those gatekeepers, those subconscious blocks, those suppressed emotions, those limiting beliefs. And they haven't processed those things. And that's why they can't go within, because you face all those inner demons when you try to meditate. So This whole fascination with meditation, over the last couple decades, actually, ever since transcendental meditation was brought to the West. I believe it was by the Beatles. Actually, it was brought to the West, I believe. Ever since then, and this whole fascination with meditation, I mean, a lot of people can't do it, and I finally kind of understand why. And I'm not saying meditation is for everybody. There's different kinds of these practices that people can engage in. Meditation is just one. Journaling, spending time in nature, going for a walk, almost, yoga, Tai Chi. There's all sorts of different things. There's Qigong. There's different ways to excavate the depths of who you are, right? And it's what resonates with you. But the thing is that in order to become a whole and complete human being, you have to go deep within. You have to face those inner demons. You have to do the shadow work. You have to integrate your shadow into your higher self, right? The shadow is just fuel for our higher self. That's all it is. And by the shadow, I mean like all those negative aspects of who we are, those darker aspects, which could be the suppressed emotions, subconscious blocks. It could be negative experiences that we've been through that we haven't fully processed or dealt with. So, and this is why, like nowadays, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still face challenges, right? We all face challenges, but just by being incarnate into this physical form and on this planet, this earth is just a school. That's all it is. Our souls have been incarnated here in order to experience this earth school, in order to discover our true nature, and in order to realize ourselves as pure consciousness, right? And it's sad, but there's not many people who realize that in this lifetime. And then I don't know, like I don't want to speculate on things such as reincarnation and this sort of thing, but I mean, people say some people discover that they may have lived many lifetimes. So maybe their soul has incarnated in many different forms because it has not reached the pinnacle it is supposed to reach. And there's still a lot of work to be done, right? Mm-hmm. And this is kind of the whole idea of reincarnation. And I have no opinion one way or the other about whether this is a true phenomenon, because I cannot prove it scientifically, but I've heard stories from various people who, who said that, they resonate with a certain type of person or character that they have come across. I mean, let's give you an example, and I don't know if it means anything, but I am really, really fascinated with samurai warriors. I'm into martial arts, and I have been I got into it late in my life, so I've been into it for, I don't know, maybe at least 10 years. And I'm really fascinated by the samurai. Now, does that mean that maybe at some point in my past, maybe, I don't know, did I ever encounter them, or was I ever one? I have no idea. Can't comment on that, but there is a fascination with that. And I have a strong fascination also with any kind of indigenous people, people who are close to nature, right? And this is what our indigenous people were. They were all very close to nature. We become far removed from nature in our modern world. And it's interesting because, I've always been an adventurous person as a child. I always used to go out and explore and I ride my bike into different neighborhoods. There was fields and forests around where I used to live. I used to go in there and explore, and I used to, go into the streams and catch frogs and crayfish and, look for turtles and all these sorts of things, and had this sense of adventure. And just over the last, how many years would I say? Maybe 14 years. that sense of adventure got rekindled, I just got interested in wilderness survival and primitive skills and animal tracking. And I started to seek out people who could teach me these things, and I have. Even though after I learned all this many years ago, I left it for a while, but then I've come back to it. And I believe that it's not, I thought it was, I was seeking adventure, but what I really feel now is that I want to have that deep connection to nature because I'm getting back to my roots. I think I am rediscovering my ancestral roots where all of our ancestors lived in harmony with nature. We did not plunder and pillage nature. We took from her what we needed for our well-being and for our survival, in terms of building shelters from wood and hunting and foraging for our food, and making clothing out of the hides of animals. So that's been rekindled in me, and I have like a deep reverence and respect and love for nature. It's interesting because a lot of people I know have pets. They have dogs and cats, and people ask me, how come you don't have a pet? I go, well, because for me, I'd rather be out in the wild, in nature, and I'd rather encounter a wild animal. I'd rather do that than keep a domestic pet. For me, that's more real, more surreal. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's just my deep reverence and my desire to connect with nature. So, yeah.
No, I think you made some really good points. I think fundamentally, when people observe something like a yin yang, sort of an expression of Lao Tzu's sort of transformation of Taoist metaphysics that was handed down to him from the Yellow Emperor, and that really is an example of the very essence of all things when you look at the yin yang symbol. But moreover, when you look deeper at that, we look at the nature of yang and yin not as good or bad. It's just yang and yin. So the bad aspect would be a representation subject to the individual's experience. Yin is just a pure source essence that is part of yang. It's a pure source essence, and then the merging of the two, creating all things as one, is the journey of a Taoist to follow that within their own lifetime. Right. So it's like two sides of a mountain, one's yin, one's yang. Yeah. You go up the mountain and merge the two together and create one, all things, or what we call the stillness between the breath in and the breath out, which is the Wu Ji, which is the mother of all things, the Tao.
Yeah.
And so there's a fundamental sort of I think a misrepresentation through society when you look at these things, and it's subject to right back to your little t, big T. I agree with you 1,000%. It's subject to the life of your experiences, the sum of your life experiences that are generating these events that within a Taoist model, which is basically the Taoist alchemy is the foundation of Chinese medicine. And that comes back to an understanding that everything is a thought, feeling, and emotion that's merged into and identifies as an expression of a physicality once the energetics have merged within the physical flesh. So then it transmutes into that manifestation, whatever that might be. And we look at the 5 elements, and we look at the energy centers, and every emotion enters the yellow court, which is the diaphragm, and then it's dispersed to the individual organs that it would reside in. And the mastery is taking the emotion and neutralizing or dissolving that emotion and revealing the virtue that lies within that particular energy center, organ, however you want to perceive it. And I mean, that just goes in line with everything you were speaking of, which is so powerful. And then it brings you back to that indigenous stuff, which is so rich in
Hmm.
its nature. And, I always say that, I just teach people indigenous practices that I was taught as a priest of two lineages of Taoism. And then it's kind of like you kind of merge that. Now, the origins of mankind these days is really questionable at this point. A friend of the channel, Michael Cremo, I think I've spoken of this, but it goes back a million years, and he can find evidence, actual evidence of such a thing in
Hmm.
this same physical form. So, the idea that everything was sort of
Hmm.
relevant in the last, 5 or 6 thousand years is just absolutely
Yeah,
false.
no, I
And
agree.
so, you have that intuitive feeling and understanding there's something greater out there that has lasted.
Hmm.
I mean, if you start believing the Big Bang theory, then everything has existed for 13 billion years, and now they're referring to it as 26 billion. I mean, it just keeps going on. The truth is, there isn't a knowing. That's why they call it a theory, and that's okay having a theory, but it will resonate with you.
Oh,
This
for
is where
sure.
this whole visceral kinesthetic response comes, that you separate. I always tell people, if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling. You're feeling the very experience. I think that's what's drawn you to these indigenous practices, because you're
Nice.
getting the visceral kinesthetic response that validates what it is that you're experiencing is true to you. And so there's so much to that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's true because the thing is that, you know, in our modern world, right, no matter how far we get removed from our indigenous roots, no matter how far we get removed from the natural world, no matter how far we get removed from our true nature, what we're all going to discover. I mean, okay, I mean, I can't speak for you, but people who I know, family, friends, colleagues, they're facing tremendous challenges. Okay, tremendous challenges. And then if you look at the world, it's chaos. I mean, you have war in Ukraine and Russia. You have war in the Middle East. You have a lot of regional conflicts. People are losing faith in political systems that are falling
Hmm.
apart. The economy is basically run on a false premise. It's all basically run out of debt and borrowing. It's not even real wealth. It's all just it's all debt. The U.S. is what, trillions of dollars in debt. So there's all this chaos and turmoil, not on a global scale, but in our individual lives. But the reason I believe that all of this is happening is because we have become so far removed from our indigenous roots, from the natural world, and from our own true nature of consciousness, right? Because we are just seeking on the surface, right? We're just seeking these superficial pleasures, and we're looking for. I mean, if I look at let's look at one example in society, which is something I've never understood. Okay, the fascination with professional sports. I mean, some of the biggest earning entertainment in the world is like the NFL, the NBA, NHL. I mean, other professional sports. People become so identified with a certain team. Like almost to the point of like religious fanaticism. And I've never understood that. Like, I mean, it's just a sport. It's just a game, right? It's just competition.
Hmm.
But I understand it now. The reason is because they're trying to find meaning in something, right? So if their team wins, that gives them meaning. That gives them something that they can latch onto because they have lost sight of their roots, their origins, their true nature. We have lost sight of that, and that this is why there's this fascination with professional sports. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there's anything with watching professional sports or going to see it in live or anything. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but when people become so identified, I mean, you hear these stories more so in Europe of these soccer fans that there's like a key game going on between two different football. They call it football between two different football teams, and fights break out in the stands and like riots and all this thing. I don't know if it happens as much anymore, but I used to hear about these stories over the last 10, maybe 20 years of these fights breaking out, and because these people have become so identified with their team to the point where if someone says something wrong or things aren't going their way, they're willing to get into like an altercation with a fellow human being. It makes no sense. So what I'm saying is that all this turmoil and chaos and adversity that we are facing, both globally and individually, is there for a reason. That's why I don't. I actually welcome it. I bless it because it is meant to help us go deeper. Because if I hadn't faced all my challenges in my life,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be where I am right now. I wouldn't have been forced to go deep within. I wouldn't have been forced to explore human behavior, the human being, human potential, consciousness, metaphysics, healing, indigenous traditions. I wouldn't have done any of that if my life would have been easy. I would have gotten everything that I want. So that's the reason why we are facing so much adversity. And then the thing is that if you look at the world, all these things are crumbling. Education system, I mean, that's falling apart. It hasn't really changed much from post World War II, and children and adolescents are disillusioned with education. That's why they get so bored and they're not giving attention to it. Political systems, people have lost faith in political systems and government. I mean, if you look at this is an election year in the United States, right? And I don't want to talk politics. I don't care what you believe about political leaders and candidates who are running, but what I have seen, and I can only speak because of the media, is that people have really lost faith in your current president. It's not my president, but Joe Biden. They have really lost faith in him, and the thing is that they're turning to Donald Trump, who's the Republican candidate, to come in and fix things. But even if you look at him, like who are we picking as a candidate for the leader of the free world, right? I mean, here's someone who has faced his own adversity and his own trauma in his childhood, and he speaks of it. I mean, he didn't have a good relationship with his father, and this is well written about. And he himself faced trauma, and that's why he has become so successful. Because I feel, I'm just using him as an example, that he is achieving so much, a billionaire, president of the United States, which he already was, and he very well likely will become one again, possibly, because he's trying to achieve something to cover up his own pain or the things he hasn't dealt with from his past or his childhood or whatever. So what I'm saying is that people have losing faith in our systems, education, politics, economics, and whatever, and all these institutions are crumbling. They're crumbling, and the thing is that doesn't scare me in the one bit, because for something greater to emerge, something has to die, right? I mean, just look at nature. Like in the fall, plants die, trees fall off the leaves, the trees become barren, and then in the spring, and all that vegetation goes into the soil, it decomposes, it feeds that soil, provides it nutrients, and then the next spring, it all comes alive, right? The birds come back, the trees start to bud, flowers start to bloom. So something has died for that to emerge. And this is just a metaphor for what's happening in our world. The old paradigm has to die and dissolve and die in order for something new to emerge. A different way of seeing ourselves, a different way of seeing, a greater way of seeing ourselves and the world we live in. Not seeing as it's not about it's me against you, right? The survival of the fittest is not the way nature works. Nature is about mutual cooperation.
Funny you
And
say that. Do you know where that came from?
no, go ahead and enlighten me.
This genius that people seem to recall through history by the name of Darwin.
Oh, yes, of course. I knew
Really?
where that came from.
And
I thought you were referring to the mutual cooperation. Yes, the survival of the fittest came from Charles Darwin, right?
right, which is a real
yeah,
twist that you understand generations later, and where people still associate themselves with that very expression,
of
yet they
course
have no idea where it came from. It's hundreds of years old.
it is, and
Really strange.
it's not the true nature
No.
of reality. And the thing is that the way I live our lives, it's still as though it's a survival of the fittest, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, like we have to look out for ourselves as individuals, right? We have to provide for our own needs, because even though we are beings of energy and pure consciousness, we are physical beings. We have to live in these physical structures. Well, we don't have to, but we do. Majority of us live in these physical structures, and then we have to pay bills. We have to, we have to work for a living. We have to earn money to buy the things we want to do, things we want to, things we want to achieve, that sort of thing, right? So, I mean, we are physical beings, and we need to look after ourselves, but not to the exclusion of our fellow man, right? Not to the exclusion of our neighbor, not to the exclusion of that homeless person that you pass by when you're in a big city, not to the exclusion of I don't know, that drug addict who is suffering because they're probably using those drugs as a way to cover up their own pain and their own suffering and that they dealt with, and nobody has shown them the way. No one has shown them how they can manage that through anything other than addiction, right? So we have to look after ourselves as individuals, right? But we have to look out for everybody. There's a saying in Islam. There's something called hadith, and hadith means prophetic traditions from our prophet, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So there's one of these prophetic traditions that says, if one person is suffering, then the whole of humanity is suffering. Okay, well, what that means is that there is no separation between us and all of humanity, right? And then we can see this, like there's very little that happens in any part of the world that doesn't have a global impact, right? It has a global impact, economically, politically, environmentally, right? So what I'm saying is that we need to realize that we are all one and the same. And, this divisiveness that is in society, whether it's racial divisions, whether it's, political divisions, whether it's based on religion, all of that is just an illusion. There is no separation. There is no difference between you and I.
Hmm.
I'm no better than anybody.
Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, getting that deep, that brings me to more indigenous sort of like cultivating practices to realize this very moment as being the only thing that's real, the present
Mhm.
moment right now. The gift is your offering, the
Yeah,
present,
the
this
presence.
very second.
Yeah.
And so when you've pursued your indigenous practices, and you said you've lived a life of martial admiration for the last 10 years, what kind of practices have you, because clearly you've used qigong or
Mm.
other types of like tai chi or cultivating practices. Do you have any specific system that you use?
No, so like I mean, I've been heavily into martial arts. I have not actually. I have done some qigong, um, but basically my stillness practices are very simple. I do meditate, not necessarily on a regular basis, but as much as I can. I do breath work every day. So I mean, there's different kind of schools and schools of thought around breath work. Um, I follow something called Buteyko, Buteyko. It's name of a Russian scientist who came up with various breathing techniques, and I've been taught this many years ago by someone who was certified in that form. So
Mhm.
I do a lot of breath work, daily breath work. I do grounding. Grounding means walking barefoot on the earth. Okay.
Mhm.
And there's many reasons for that. So I try to do that every day, although I don't always get out there. I try to do it early in the morning. And I live in Canada, right? So there's sometimes just snow on the ground. Although the snow doesn't stop me from going barefoot in the ground, it doesn't. So the grounding, the reason for that is because um, what happens is that it removes the negative charges. Because the earth is charged a certain way, it removes the negative charges, and it basically by removing those, it actually helps your circulation, and it helps your overall well-being. And if you look at our indigenous ancestors, I mean, they were barefoot for the most time, right? Well, for the most part, they were barefoot. So there is a reason for that. They were close to the earth, and the grounding is not only just for circulation or physiology, but it also gives you a direct connection to the earth, right? So I do the grounding practice. Speaking of that, I spend a lot of time in nature. One of the things I was talking about learning primitive skills. One of the things I have learned over the last 10 years through various mentors, one in particular, is animal tracking. And and not because I'm a hunter and I don't hunt at all. I'm not vegetarian, but I don't hunt. But, anyways, I'm going out into nature and actually looking for the signs of wildlife out there and finding animal tracks and then just seeing the life of that animal through its tracks and seeing what it did. And I can tell you lots of stories. I mean, once we trailed a coyote for like several kilometers, we found where um, it had killed a prey. I think it may have been a squirrel or something, and we saw the remains there. And then we followed it. So you get to see through tracking um, the world through the eyes of that animal. And for me, like I've always been interested in hiking and camping and canoeing, and a lot of people do those things, right? But this, when you're out in nature, when you're doing those things, when you're camping and you're hiking and you're canoeing and all those things, but it's more a superficial being in nature because most people who do those things I mentioned, they have no awareness of what's happening around them. Okay. By diving into this animal tracking, when I go out into the woods, I'm actually paying attention. I am listening. I am looking. I'm smelling. I am touching plants and trees and I have a greater awareness of where I am and my place in it. And that brings me back to the point you made earlier about presence and being in the moment. Because when you're tracking, there is no separation between tracking and awareness. It's all in the same thing. And a lot of those traditions came from, I don't know if you've heard of someone by the name of Tom Brown. Tom Brown is someone who was taught by an Indigenous elder in the ways of primitive living, tracking, and other Indigenous spiritual traditions. And he started a school called the Tracker School, which is out in New Jersey. And he has taught probably thousands of people since actually probably 1979, maybe, or 78. And the school is still running. It's probably run by other people now, but he has preserved a lot of those traditions and has passed it on to other people, and they've gone to open their own schools. And my point is that there's this whole realm of deep nature connection, which most people don't even know about, even people who spend so much time in the outdoors. And I would say, you're asking me about my practices, right? We talked about meditation and breath work and my martial arts, but I would say the nature connection is probably one of my deepest practices.
Do you?
Just being out there. And
Yeah, I mean, do you focus at all on the energetics a little bit more concentrated wise?
yes, I do, because there is
energy,
yes, yes. So that's a whole other level of tracking, right? Because animal tracking for most people is just, well, okay, find the footprints and then figuring out which species it is and what kind of gait it has and what it was doing, right? So that's one level of tracking, but you can get deeper into it, right? There's like that tracking the energy, right? Tracking the energy in the forest, like, and not being a disturbance. See, most people who are out in nature, like they're moving loudly, they're making a lot of noise, they're talking, and basically, when you're doing all those things, you're disturbing everything around you, right? There's this whole from tracking, I learned about bird language, and I don't know if there's something you've come across, but birds have a language of their own, and birds are the warning signs of the forest. So what happens is that birds are what alert other animals that there's danger nearby. So when one of, say, human being goes, like, is walking through the forest, not paying attention to anything, just kind of barreling through from point A to point B, and not paying attention and not kind of being aware of the surroundings. When you come close to any birds that are around you, they will fly off from wherever their perch or their tree, wherever they are, and they'll let out a call, and it's called an alarm call, a warning call, and that call can be heard for a long distance, and other animals know, okay, there's something happening, there's a disturbance in the forest, right? And that's why most people never see wildlife when they're out in the woods, right? And a lot of people don't want to see wildlife, right? They don't want to encounter it. But for me, that's the beauty of being out in nature, is to encounter wildlife, to be close to those animals. People are scared of like encountering wolves and bears. Not me. I long for the day that I can encounter a wolf in the woods. Just because I think that they're beautiful creatures, and I have no fear, right? Because I mean, I'll tell you a story. I was on a tracking trip in Algonquin Park, which is a thousands and thousands of square kilometer park just north of Toronto. I went in 2.5 hours on a tracking expedition. We were about 10 of us with our two mentors. So we broke up into two groups. We went out into the woods, and we came across two moose. Okay, two male moose. So we were tracking them from a distance. And then, we didn't want to get too close to them. So then, they kind of disappeared. Then we took a break, we had lunch, and we followed their tracks. And we were trying to figure out where they were going and what they were doing. We had no idea that they were just over the ridge. So we followed their tracks, and we thought they had been long gone. And then, lo and behold, they're right there. like 20 to 25 feet from us. So there was 4 or 5 of us. We all kind of just stood still. And these moose, right? Like we were so close to them that you'd think that they'd be alarmed. They were males, right? You could tell they were males, and males usually will, they can do threatening gestures if you're too close to them. These males were bedded down, and because of the presence we brought, they were so comfortable with us being there that they even had their eyes closed and they didn't give us a second look. Like they didn't even like in most cases they would have just gotten up and taken off. But we were so fully present, and we had that kind of the positive energy that we were bringing, because we're not hunting. We're out there. We just want to encounter wildlife. We want to get close to them. So I was within 25 foot of a bull moose, two of them. It was an absolutely surreal experience.
Yeah.
And there was no fear. There was no fear, because when I came back and I told people who are not of this world, that they're not into nature, they don't even camp or hike or whatever. I told him the story. He goes, "Well, weren't you scared? Didn't they attack you?" I said, "Not at all. I was not scared." And they just sat there, bedded down, for the most part, just with their eyes closed, just resting in our presence. And we stayed there for like 15 minutes, and we decided, you know what? Let's give them their space and their peace. They have given us this gift of this intimate encounter in nature. Now we're going to slowly back away and we're going to leave them alone. And we did.
Hmm.
It was a beautiful experience.
Yeah, I mean, these are sort of you talk about feeling the energy. I mean, that's what within Taoism we train you in all sort of like levels of degrees of energetic
Mm-hmm.
perception.
Yeah.
So human dowsing is a very common thing for us to be able to, like, for example, that room you're in right now has 4 vortices.
Okay.
Three of them are high frequency. The other one is a low. Now,
Okay.
if we're looking at ley lines and other things of that nature, we can start getting deeper into the feng shui of that particular space. But when I mention that, it's always the amazement, because you can have your eyes open, you're not sitting in the lotus position, calling in your guides and asking for your spiritual acknowledgement of a higher sense of knowing. When I point it out to you and you go to it and you feel it, like the visceral feeling you're feeling now with a bit of charge of energy in your hands, that is real.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That pulpability is very tangible, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so the sensitivity of your energetics, you can be very sensitive. You know, your lung channel is pretty much open, so that's the first representative of how sensitive your energetic subtleties are. And it's expressed through the lung channel, expressed through the dermal layer.
Yes.
And your ability to feel energy and that visceral effect, like that blood flow you just got, it's like, oh, okay, I kind of feel what he's saying. But if I actually got you to go up and feel it, you'd be like, that's 1000% there. And you'll come and go. This podcast will come and go, and you'll go back to the same place tomorrow and go, son of a bitch, San Qing was right. It's right here. Yeah, because it doesn't leave you. It's just like the energetics are really palpable. So, you know, just like I talked to you about energy, and you're sensitive to energy. If I put your attention to putting your hands on a table in front of you, just like now, with your palms up like this, just drop them on the table. Just put them on the table. Relax.
Okay.
Now I'm just going to charge a little bit of energy in there. Now, sort of move your hands up.
Okay.
And start to feel the difference in the density.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's quite palpable.
It is palpable.
And so if I just use the breath like now, that's right there. That's not a figment of your imagination. That's happening.
No. Yeah.
And it's real. Now, if you put your hands to your side like this and just palpate the energy very slowly.
Okay.
Why don't you describe what you're experiencing?
Yeah, definitely. There's, for lack of a better word, there's some sort of palpable force of some kind.
Yeah. And if I just put my focus in the center of the center of the center
Mhm.
and just whip it up a little bit,
Right.
it becomes palpable
Yes.
and dense.
It is dense. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
No,
that's straight up energy, my friend.
oh, for sure. Yeah. No, that's, yeah.
And if you actually put your, say for example, you got an object, you got a piece of fruit or something.
Yeah, I have a piece of fruit right here.
What do
A
you got?
mango.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. Feel the weight of that.
Okay.
Okay. Put it on the table.
Okay.
Now you can be the observer. Put your hands like this, right? So as if you're palpating the heat of a fire. You don't have to palpate anything. Just hold it there because you're going to experience it when I drop this energy, and it's completely different. Are you ready?
Hmm.
3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Now, yeah, there's quite a distinct. It's almost like someone drops something like a ball of gum or something that comes from the sky out of nowhere. Now pick up the fruit and tell me what it feels like.
More dense.
Very dense. It's imprinted, my friend, with high frequency energy.
Yeah, it's dense. A
Yeah.
lot denser than, yeah, heavier.
Yeah, because it's imprinted. It's a whole different. Now, if you put that down, check this out. Put it down. Now,
Yeah.
put your hands out like this, and the auric field of it is palpable. So just palpate the auric field of the piece of fruit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then if you use your fingers like tuning forks, like this, just sort of point it towards and get far enough away from the fruit that you can slowly merge your hand towards the fruit and
Mm-hmm.
watch the degree of difference as you go to the center of it, what you're experiencing, and you can explain it.
Yeah, you can feel the energy field. Yeah.
And as you get closer,
Right. Yeah, increased density. Yeah. When I get right close to it, I feel kind of a tingling.
yeah, oh yeah, it feels like a white hot sort of white hot feeling on your fingertips.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah,
This is called indigenous magical practices that are for real.
no,
And
for
so
sure.
when you go deep into this stuff, you're transmuting and changing things real time, the present moment.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
like as real as you can get, and that's
Yeah.
why I like having conversations with people and showing them with their eyes open. Oh no, but you got me to meditate. You took me through a meditation. No, this is now. If I take you through what someone would consider a meditation, they'll be high as a kite for 3 days straight. This is just a little toke of the old spiritual doobie
Little
right
tape.
now. This is not when I take people on experiences, it's transformative. I teach
Right.
people how to activate DMT in their body for 3 days straight, not for 20 minutes because you induce some external force and people are pursuing their desire for some spiritual awakening. You
Right.
have it within you, just as we've confirmed throughout this whole conversation. And I know you understand the innate value, the true intrinsic
Sure.
value of that.
No,
And
for sure.
so many people run away with the psychonaut title that they need to pursue all the external. And there's nothing wrong with that. I find that that's the biggest tease for most people.
The
So they
external,
get a taste.
the
They get
external.
a taste by using the psychedelics,
Yeah.
mushrooms, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it's very limited. So then they want to. The whole point of it is come to someone that can teach you how to create that chemistry in your body, and you can have it at will. You don't have to have this little dip into reality.
I see.
That's reality. Being able to see all this stuff.
So you're saying that they don't necessarily need the substance to,
Well, no, absolutely not. No,
right.
I teach people how to go inside, activate the chemical response in your body by
Uh-huh.
using these indigenous practices.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the psychedelics have become so popular these days.
Very popular.
So popular. I mean, it's in the media. I mean, it's become kind of like a cliche, and I think it's just like people are seeking. I think people are seeking. I mean, they want something more. They want to go beyond. I mean, the superficial. They want to go into the depths. And the thing is, like,
What's
sometimes,
holding that resonance?
it's holding that resonance, but sometimes you need that little entry point, right? In order, like,
Well,
some people need that
you can
entry point.
you can justify it, but like just like you experienced right now. Have you experienced anything like that before?
I have, but this is different. I have experienced some energy type of work before, but this is different. This is different. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
this is not a hey, I want you to.
No.
No. That's like the what we call in this space the rice bowl stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you got to get your bills paid somehow. No, I'm here to teach people how to evoke it within themselves.
Oh no, for sure. But like I said, like, yeah, for a lot of people, if it's an entry point, but I agree with you that they can't just stay there.
Well, that's the disappointment. That's
That
the
you
other
can't
reason.
stay there. You can't just stay there, like, relying on psychedelics in order to get you into that. I mean, use it as an entry point, but you have to go beyond that, right?
Well,
Yeah.
that's the biggest misconception. I've never come across someone. They always end up my doorstep having had these experiences.
Experiences,
They
yeah.
want to actually learn it. I'm like, that's what internal alchemy. That's why Taoists are second to none for internal alchemy, because we can replicate it. There is a system that replicates the ability to access these things and repeat them over and over and over again, because that's part of the mastery.
Yes, for
You
sure.
know, activating DMT, activating oxytocin,
All of,
activating a biochemical response in your body that goes beyond your wildest imagination, that
right.
inherently enhances well-being. So you're getting all this chemistry. You're being the master, keeper, creator of your gene expression by your thought, feeling, and emotion. And that's the starting point, using what we call the three treasures: the pineal, pituitary, and thalamus,
Mhm.
the alchemical fun factory. And once you get that, then you start to dictate where your 0.07 millivolts of electricity goes.
For
Now
sure.
you start being a maestro of 50 trillion cells, crazy things start happening. And all of a sudden you're like, ooh, this is on a whole nother level. And it should be. I've come to the acceptance that I'm here to help people come to that realization, the internal power that they have within them.
Right.
And that raises that whole thing up, exactly what we've been talking about this whole conversation about: the dysfunction, the disconnect, the removal from the true nature of who they are,
Right.
and realizing how powerful they are as themselves, as a singular, as a collective, as a oneness.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And
Essentially.
so, go ahead.
No. Essentially, I mean, you said it. You said it. You said it beautifully. I mean, um, it's just like that story I described about me and my group of trackers getting close to those two bull moose.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason we were able to do that is because we were fully present and the energy that we were emanating. Right. I
Well,
mean,
yeah. I mean, I do that in
yeah,
the sense
exactly.
of, you just create a wave, a delta wave, and you put them to sleep.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's a conscious thing you can do. You're in the moment, but
Yeah.
being in that moment means that you have access that ability.
Right.
But then consciously being able to repeat it perhaps might be a little bit more challenging as you start thinking about it. But if
Yes,
you start becoming the observer and realize that,
for
and I
sure.
just transmit that brainwave,
Yes.
I put it. Animals are easy because they don't have any. They're not thinkers. They're not
No,
like
they're not.
humans. So sentient beings having no process other than the present moment. When you transmit a brainwave like that, I haven't found an animal I can't put to sleep
Mhm.
fairly quickly
Mhm.
because it's a transmission. But human beings could be a little problematic, but not necessarily once you move through the path of understanding their obstacles.
For sure.
Until further notice, they are subject to their unconscious behavior.
They are, and it's like a whole deeper level of being in nature, right? I mean, like I told you, a lot of people love the outdoors, but it's more about self gratification. I guess I could say, like, accomplishing something, finishing a hike,
Mhm.
a portage, a canoe trip, or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those are great things, right? There's hikes that I want to do here in northern Ontario. But the thing is that if you're if you enter that sacred, like, I think nature is sacred. If you enter that sacred space with a different energy and a different intention,
Mhm.
you will have different experiences, right? I mean,
Well,
one,
yeah.
one of the things I'll tell you, I'll let you and see, but one of the things is that with my tracking group, anytime we go out tracking, a group of people, we go out tracking. You know how we start off our tracking
Mhm.
expedition that day? With gratitude. The first thing we do is we share gratitude. What are you grateful for? And when you share gratitude, it puts you in a certain state of mind and it gives you a certain energy. And then when you walk into the woods with that, nature notices. The birds notice.
Mm.
The animals notice.
Yeah. Oh, it's a frequency.
Yes,
It's a,
it's a
it's a
vibrational frequency. That's all it is. Yeah.
Now, I unfortunately we're gonna have to cut this short, which is very disappointing to me because I wanted to continue this conversation.
Yeah.
Normally, I get 3 hours. Today, I got an hour and a half, and then I'm on tomorrow. I'm on to another appointment, which is very disappointing. But
Okay. We can always do this again another
I
time.
would love to do this again. I'm pretty sure you would. I will
Yes.
tell you a caveat is when you bite into that peach, it's going to have a tingling sensation. Do not be concerned.
Mango. Mango.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're going to have a very, very much a high tingling sensation that will go through your
Excellent.
teeth.
Looking
And
forward
so
to it.
you're going to get an electric charge there, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just
Okay.
it's altered. So
I'm looking forward to it.
I just want to finish off with the one question: what is your definition of consciousness?
That's a great question, and I wasn't even prepared to answer that. My definition of consciousness is knowing who you truly are, which is the deepest level of being. It is knowing from where not only where you arose, but where all of creation arose, which is from the same source, which is consciousness, and realizing that there is no separation between you, other people, between you and nature, between you and the earth, you and the solar system, the galaxy, the universe, that we are all one
Mm-hmm.
and we are all expressions of that same consciousness that permeates all of creation.
Love it. Beautiful, beautiful, my friend. I want to thank you. I'm going to put all your social under this podcast, and I'm going to make sure that the audience knows where to find you. I want
Sure.
them to seek you out and take a deeper look at your exploration and your offerings. And I want to thank you for joining us on the podcast today. I'm very grateful for the
San,
incredible.
San King, I'm grateful for the conversation. It went places I didn't expect, but that's what I love about these kinds of conversations, that I never enter them with any expectation. I just let it flow. Actually, flow is the topic of my next book, so we can talk about it next time.
I want to thank you, my friend. I'm very grateful to have you in my life. I want to thank the universe, Tao, God, Buddha, Allah, whoever it is that you resonate with,
Yeah, no,
and
all of them.
thank all of them and thank them for bringing this present moment. I
Yeah.
want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.
See you.